Now that we've refined our layout for various screens, devices, and viewport sizes, there's one more step we can take to make sure our content is also presentable for printing. Because it isn't just about the screen and viewport size. Adapting to different media also means we'll need to include paged media. Let's find out how.
Many users rely on being able to print pages from websites, usually for reference. So we can create a print style sheet to format a web page so that when printed, it prints in a user-friendly and readable format. So first, let's take a close look at a couple of sites that make really good use of print style sheets. So first up, we have smashingmagazine.com, which, as we can see, has quite a bit of navigation up top here and to the side, and there are some ads over to the side. So I'll go ahead and click on an article, and we can see the ads a little bit more here. So let's take a look at this in print preview. So I'll just hit Command P, and now we can see that when the page is set to print, we're left with the logo, the title of the article, some metadata here, and the content. The navigation and the ads have all been removed. So the next site we'll take a look at is the nextweb.com, which is very similar to Smashing Magazine. It has a lot of sidebar content and navigation, which then gets nicely formatted for print. So as we can see, a print style sheet really improves usability, especially for pages with a lot of content, like we just saw. The great thing is that print style sheets are pretty simple to implement. So let's go ahead and create one of our own. I've created an example blog template with a main content area and a sidebar section. Below, we also have some comments, and finally the footer here at the bottom. I've placed all the pages layout styles in a file called page.css, but for this example, we'll be creating the print styles in a separate file called style.css. If we go ahead and take a look at our template here in print preview, we can see that it needs a bit of work. We need to do a little reformatting, and there are a few extra elements that need to be removed. When creating a print style sheet, we'll need to consider a few things. Being that we have a lot of different elements on the page, we'll need to think about where we can cut back, because with print, we're limited to the physical space of the printed page. The printable area is usually less than 8.5 by 11. So if, for example, a user needs to print an article that has a lot of comments at the bottom of the page, that would be something we'd need to hide with the style sheet so that the user wastes no time or ink printing it. So we'll need to do our best to remove those page elements that are considered irrelevant in print, because users aren't really trying to print things such as our navigation, our sidebar, search fields, or even ads. Most of the time, they're just trying to print the content. Also, and this is important, since print is static, we'll need to think about some of our interactive elements, for example, our links. So we'll create our print media query here in our style.css file, and we'll start with the media @ rule, followed by print, then a set of curly braces. So this works just like the other media types we've covered. It tells the browser that all styles within this style block should be used only when printing a page, because print is intended for any paged material and for pages viewed on a screen in print preview mode. And again, recreating the entire CSS for our template is not necessary because the default styles will still be inherited by this print query. So we only need to include the differences and what we'd like to see printed. So at the very least, we should apply certain styles for print. So we'll first select the universal selector, and we will use the background property and give it the value transparent. Underneath that, we will use the color property, which we will define a color of black. Then a box shadow property, which we will set to none. And finally, a text shadow property, which we'll also define as none. Now, we'll want to increase the specificity for these because they're crucial to the print experience, and we never want them to be overridden. So we'll need to add important after each value. In these types of cases, it's okay to use important because we know that these styles will always need to be defined this way for print. So this rule alone simplifies a lot of the visual styles on the page for print. It prevents any background images and color from being printed by turning them off with transparent. The text colors are also turned to black, and any text shadows or box shadows are removed because they're just unnecessary for print and it might hinder the readability of text. Now, the reason we made all text color black is because black text will print much faster and it will also save the user some ink in the printer. But above all, it will improve the readability of the content when printed. Next, we need to take out some of those elements that are not suitable for print. For example, the search field and the sidebar content, also the main nav and the comment section below here, and the footer as well. So in our style.css file, we'll go ahead and add a new selector rule by first selecting our main nav element, our sidebar, our comment section, and finally the main footer. And we will give them a display property with the value none. Pretty simple, right? So let's see what this is looking like so far. In the browser, I will bring up print preview by typing Command P, and we now see that the extra elements like the nav and sidebar have been removed. So that's good. Next, we'll need to take care of a few things in our header. So we'll need to get rid of some of this bottom margin here, also the top blue border. We'll also text align the header to center so that our logo is nicely aligned in the top center of the page. So back in our CSS, we will create a new rule by selecting main header. Then we'll use a margin bottom property, which will display to 0. And we will give it a border of none. And finally, we will text align everything to center. So we'll save this. We'll go back in our browser, hit refresh. When I bring up print preview, we can see that it looks much better. That blue border is no longer there. The header is nicely aligned center, and there's not as much bottom margin here. So next, we'll need to create print-friendly links, because paper is not an interactive medium. So of course, our readers cannot click on any links to visit other pages and get more information. So what we need to do is display the destination or the full URL of the link next to the link's text. So back in our print media query, let's add a few CSS rules that will expand the full link only when printed. So we'll start by using an attribute selector that targets a link's href attribute. Then we'll use the after pseudo element. In the rule, we will use the content property, and we will go ahead and set the content value to the attribute function, where we'll insert a link's href value as content. So what this does is it takes the value of the href attribute and places it as text content to the right of a link. And we'll go ahead and set the link color to blue so that the links will stand out from surrounding text. So let's save this. Back in the browser, we'll refresh the page. And when we bring up print preview, we can see how each link has the full URL next to the link text. But we don't always need every link on the page printed next to the text. We'll usually want to avoid displaying relative links. For example, in our print preview here, we can see that the links for the logo and the image aren't really necessary because they don't offer anything else other than links to internal pages. So we want to limit those for external resources or reference link, like we have at the bottom here. Now, a good solution for us here is to use the begins with substring matching attribute selector and select only those links beginning with HTTP. So these will be the ones that are printed next to the link text. So let's refresh this in the browser and bring up print preview. And now we can see that the logo link is gone along with the image link, and only those with external links are printed next to the text. We can also define margins around the printed page using the page at rule. So for example, inside our page rule here, we will use the margin property and we will give it a value of 0.5 centimeters. So now we can put those absolute units to good use here because the values we defined apply to the physical measurements of the page. So in our browser, we'll refresh, and in print preview, we can see how we added a 0.5 centimeter margin around the page. We can also take advantage of certain pseudo-classes to style specific portions of our printed document. So below that, I will type at page. Then after page, I will add a space and type first. So the first pseudo-class will add the styles defined only to the first printed page. So if we add a margin top of 2 centimeters and refresh the browser, in print preview, we can now see how only the first page has a 2 centimeter top margin, while the second page does not. We can also define where page breaks should happen on the page. For example, we can prevent page breaks directly after headings or unordered list. So in our rule, we will select the H2 elements and the unordered list, and we will add a new property, page break after, and give it the value avoid. So this tells it to avoid a page break after a heading or unordered list and force it to break before them instead. And finally, if we want to avoid orphans or widows on the printed page, we can use the orphans or widows properties. In print, orphans are the single words or stray lines that are left alone after a page break, and widows are the ones that fall before a page break. So now the page will not orphan or widow anything less than the 3 lines we've defined here. So we'll take a look at it in the browser. I'll go ahead and refresh and bring up the print preview. And there we go. Everything is looking pretty good. Now, we do need to reduce this text font size in the paragraphs a little bit because currently the text is a little too big for print. So let's go ahead and fix that. Back in our style.css file, I'll just use this last rule here, and I will add the unordered lists because we also want to reduce the font size for those. And I will use the font size property, and I will give it a value of 11 points. Again, we're using those absolute units to reduce the font size for print. I'll go ahead and save it and bring up print preview mode. And there we go. The font looks much better and is more suitable for print. Now, it's optional to remove the image. I'll go ahead and hide it since it's taken up a lot of space. So back in our media query, I will just add the image element here. which will be displayed none, along with the main nav sidebar comments in main footer. I'll save this. So we'll take a look at it in the browser. I'll refresh it and bring up print preview. And there we go. Everything looks good, and we're all set to print the page.
Since our web content can be viewed in such a wide range of devices and contexts, it's important that we consider using media queries in order to provide an acceptable experience for our core users. Support for media queries is solid, as all modern browsers and mobile devices support them. For older browsers, like IE8, that do not support them, we can easily avoid issues by building with basic styles used by all browsers first, then using media queries as an enhancement to serve specific styles to the modern browsers.